but we're doing good. So, you got a full hour, Jenny? You good? You're okay.
Sure, yeah,
All right,
good.
cool. I was trying to think of how we first met. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe through Zello originally back in the day. I
Possibly.
think we chatted.
Mhm.
And then at LFTN a couple of years ago, I believe. And I know the first time I really remember hearing about you it wasn't actually the word of the year thing. It was when you did the podcast with Nicole about having an adequate first aid kit.
Okay.
And that stuck with me. I went home and made a good first aid kit simply because of that. And then I didn't know who Jenny was, but her legacy kind of moved over into me when the word of the year thing came up. And I'm like, oh, I'll do that. And they're like, Jenny started that. I don't know who Jenny is. So we ended up getting to know each other eventually. So it's good to have you here. And so with that, I'm going to let her talk about the life you want to live, right? Roughly? Okay.
Basically.
Have fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So, freeze. Okay. How many people in this room would call themselves a coward? Yeah. Why?
Depends on the circumstance, but basically there are things I'm afraid of that don't make any sense, but sometimes I still am.
Most of us do things out of fear. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jenny. I'm going to be 41 this year. And I say it that way because last year was rough and I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. I have 3 boys and spent the last year battling cancer. When I got treatment, I got 2 doses. I got a traumatic brain injury from my treatment. I had a heart attack from my treatment and I died for a couple of minutes. That was less than a year ago. The thing I remember the most during that is that I knew that that was not how I wanted my story to finish. Things that you have to do, things that you have to go through in life that you don't choose, you have to know what that looks like for you. This means you have to know yourself. So for any of you that know me, you know that I'm usually very optimistic and encouraging and like there's nothing that you can't overcome. During that time, I was probably the angriest I'd ever been in my entire life. Because if you knew me before then, you know I went from weighing 300 pounds to losing 146 of those. I ran 3 to 5 miles a day. I was careful about what I put into my body. I was on it. I had peaked, in my opinion, in the grand scheme of things. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So now I had to figure out this new thing that's happening. I have this diagnosis, and while I can live with it for a few years without any treatment, I was offered the opportunity to do like a trial sort of thing. So bone marrow harvest, 4 heavy doses of chemo, and then an autologous transplant, and that was the plan. When you know yourself, you have to also know your enemy. You have to know what it is that you're facing and what the possibilities are, what your choices are, and what could happen. For me, that was worst case scenario. I went into something I thought was going to be like from a valley to a peak. And I stayed in the valley for a hot minute. I'm still not at the peak. So the first thing I did to prepare myself is I got this really cool scrapbooking cart because I knew that I was going to have to go through this by myself. You guys mostly know me from living in Tennessee. Well, I moved to Oklahoma not quite 2 years ago. So I'm there by myself. I don't have a support system. It's all on me. So I set up this chemo cart. I stocked it with the Mesis bags and waterproof bags and all this stuff and tried to brace myself for what could happen. I don't remember 2 weeks around that time. I have no recollection of that time at all. It's gone. I know what I've been told. I know the conversations I've had with friends. And I'm not mistaken. People thought I was pretty okay. And then I wasn't. So some things that I decided during that, after that experience, when I felt more cognizant, was what kind of life is it that I do want to live? Like, even though I thought I'd peaked, going through something like that kind of puts into perspective for you what's actually important, who has your back, who's willing to leave you. And I lost people. People left because they couldn't cope with what was happening to me in my life. And that's okay. You let people leave because you don't want people to do things for you out of resentment. The relationships I have with people now are because they want to be here. They're not going to hate me for the times that I call them and say, I really just need somebody to listen today. And the thing that I figured was the most important thing are our intangibles. They are our relationships, and that's what makes community so important. When you are left on your own to do the things, hard things like that, you figure some things out too. So question number one for me is, what is this trying to teach me? Now, you would think that cancer doesn't teach you anything, but it teaches you a lot. It teaches you how strong you really are. And by the way, if you ever tell somebody with cancer, you're so strong, don't do it. Just don't do it, because we don't have a choice. We just do it. We do what we have to do now. So I think the thing that I learned personally through that was that what I needed in my life was places I was putting my energy were not the most important things. They weren't important to me, and I was living my life for other people. And Nicole touched on this morning with the my three things. When you don't know what to choose, you always choose yourself first. And I will die, hopefully not again, on that hill, because nobody is guaranteed to stay a part of your life. Nobody is required to show up for you. The people who do, that is a blessing. So the other thing I learned is how to live from a grateful heart. When you have a grateful heart, you don't feel like you lack. You see all the things you have and all the things that you don't. And it makes life more enjoyable because you don't see the empty places, the places you feel like you need to fill. You see the things that already fill places in your life, the people that already fill places in your life. So I have my little notes. Just full disclosure, I had a presentation or half of one, and then decided to just like rough it because I think the other thing that people think is like, look how gracefully you're handling stuff. You can get up there and I can say that, and like you don't get the full impact of it, right? Nobody was there with me the days that I laid in bed covered in my own feces and vomit. Nobody was there those days that I couldn't get up out of the floor because my TBI was all activated and I was disoriented and couldn't move or speak. Those are ugly truths of what that time period was for me. There were days that I would be on the floor for 6 hours, couldn't get to my phone, couldn't get to anything, and I just had to wait for it to pass. It helped me create better boundaries in my life. And I say that from a position of, I thought that I already had good ones. I thought that I didn't do things with resentment and I didn't do things that I didn't want to do. I did a lot of those things because I think all of us in this room are doers, we're helpers. We want to make somebody else's life better, and sometimes we do it to our own detriment. And it was really humbling for me to also learn that I had to accept help sometimes, because I am not the person to ask for it. And I still have trouble asking for it. So I have my handful of friends that I can call and say, hey, can you do this thing for me? And I don't give them an out. Ever. I don't say you don't have to if you don't want to. Because if I'm asking you to do something for me, it's because I genuinely need it. And I think that's a thing that we as people, it's kind of been indoctrinated to us to like not make other people feel pressured for our stuff. I am absolutely 100% certain that things were done for me that were really hard for people to do. And so while I don't want to do things with resentment, I ask people to do things and they have to gauge for themselves. So this is why I don't give people outs. They have to be adult enough, and I have to trust that they are adult enough to say, I don't want to do that. That's too hard for me. I can't show up for you like that. So I also had to learn how to forgive people. And that one's really hard because I imagine that you can think of a time in your life, maybe you still have it, where you are stuck on something that happened to you or something you did to yourself, where you needed to forgive somebody or yourself and you just can't. I actually have a method for that specifically. So most of us have those things, the things that we don't want to change somebody's opinion of somebody else, or we don't want to impact the environment of whatever. It's even happened to me, even inside of the community. But for me, it was important for me to tell that part of my story, to name exactly what it is, because that's the other thing. We make excuses for people in our lives sometimes, and sometimes maybe that's what's necessary so that you can move forward. At the end of the day, though, you're the one that's still carrying that. So for me, when I've offended somebody or I've done something against myself, I'll talk it through. I'll try to figure out what the thing is, and so I can absolutely name the thing and say, well, when this happened, this is how I felt, and this is what I need for repair. That repair work is hard, and then sometimes that repair work can't happen, and if it can't happen, you have to be willing to let go of the other person. Most of us are very freedom oriented, and you don't consider what it's like to have to say, okay, like our relationship has met the end of its road. And now, you know, you don't want that tie. You want to give them that freedom. When you love somebody, when you give them love, you have to offer them the ability to walk away, or you have to be the person who walks away, because that resentment, that thing, will always be there and always continue to hurt the relationship. But I think I learned above everything that who I am as a person. And this goes back to knowing who you are and evaluating your own BS. And I mean your maladaptive behaviors and your, the story you tell yourself, because sometimes it's not rooted in truth. Sometimes you just say, well, I could do that, but, insert excuse here. And when you do that, you're shortchanging yourself. When you shortchange yourself, you're not living the life that you want. Ever. That will always be your narrative if you don't fix it. So I had to get very comfortable with calling myself out so that I could get very comfortable with calling other people out too. And the better you know yourself, the more you can see in other people their quirks or whatever. And some things you let slide, sure. Even with yourself, I'm sure I have some stuff right. Yeah, one or two things. Yeah. So, but I have people who love me who will forgive me for some of those things, obviously within reason. But that knowing yourself and what you're capable of is the most important thing. It helped me get through the so far the hardest year of my life, and that's saying something because I am also a survivor of child abuse. I'm a domestic violence survivor. I have lived a really challenging life. And the thing that I told myself consistently through that year is that challenges will always happen, but suffering is optional. And I choose not to suffer. Things will always happen. You'll always have things to navigate. And that became my motto for last year. When you need to grieve, you got to grieve. You got to feel it to get on the other side of it. You have to push through it. Because the alternative is what? It's staying stuck. And none of us in this room are the type of people, I think, to stay stuck. So you make your plan because you know yourself. You figure out what your challenge is and you prepare for that. And you handle everything else along the way that comes at you because that's what you have to do. Now, when I was speaking earlier about being angry, I was angry about coming back, about being alive, because that's not how I wanted to live my life. Didn't want to be sick, didn't want people to leave me. I didn't want the things that were happening. And I was stuck sitting with that. So, because I'm a nerd and I read constantly, I'd read this thing that said anger is our mind's way of saying what happened is unjust. It's our body's way of saying to us that you love yourself enough to recognize that it was unjust. And it really validated for me feeling angry. And it made my anger more palatable for me. So I can't tell you how to live your life. And I can't tell you what choices you need to make because only you can do that. But I can tell you to choose for yourself. And it's okay to consider other people. But at the end of the day, you are who you need to live with. And knowing yourself and knowing that you're worthy of help and you're worthy of love and you're worthy of actually living the life that you want, no matter what's happening. That's the thing that's going to push you forward. You say no to anything else that's not that. And no is hard. No is a really hard thing when you want to feel like, I'm going to lift people up. And I'm going to help them do this thing. And I'm going to do all this stuff. So I haven't done any traditional treatment since June last year. I've taken a completely holistic approach. I've gotten better results with my holistic approach. But there's been a whole lot of understanding what my new capacity is now. And sometimes I overestimate what I can do. And I've had to learn to say no. I've had to go back and correct myself and say, I can't do that. I thought that I could, but it's more than I can do. Let me help you find a resource. Let me help you, or I can do this part. You'll have to have other help for, something else. But all of this to say really is that you have to think of yourself first. When people put on workshops and overcommit the rest of the year and are exhausted and know you're going to get sick and know that you should say no.
I just rescheduled my Wednesday interview.
I'm so
That's
proud
why
of
I was late.
I'm just saying you have to, there's a point where you have to choose yourself first. And so living life, no matter what's happening, despite the odds, despite what you've gone through, it's more about knowing yourself and what you really want. It's more about being able to say no. It's more about understanding the nature of other people. It's, recognizing if that person's just trying to take or if they're trying to also replenish. There are so many factors in that. It's preparing for the hard times, whether they happen or not. It's when there is a hard time preparing for what you can expect. In my instance, I did that trial treatment, and nobody expected what happened to happen. Nobody else in the trial treatment experienced what I did. And I have some resentment in having chosen to do chemotherapy. I had a very close family member beg me to do it because the end result was supposed to be maybe it never staged up. And I am working on forgiveness with that because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. I'd, stood on that for a really long time that I never would. And it's really hard to say no to somebody who is sobbing and saying, please fight. And so I did something that was against my better judgment. And that to me just validated that I should trust myself. If you don't trust yourself, you're always going to make the wrong choice. So, I'm sure I have to look at me. Y'all have to excuse me. I do have brain damage. So I guess I can open for questions if we're all ready for that. No?
I actually had a question that I forgot because ADHD just got me.
Yeah.
Probably about a squirrel.
No, it was about, okay, no, I know what it is. So this morning, there were a lot of questions about how if you've gone down a path
Mm-hmm.
and you find yourself starting to feel that thing in your gut, like, whoops, I went the wrong way and I've committed to all these people. How do you get out of that? Can you give a specific example of how you would back out of it? It's not, something you can't share, but oh, I committed to this, realized I can't do it, and this is how I back out in a way that's ethically comfortable for me.
So I'm a huge fan of clarity as kindness. I would need to think about a specific example, but if you are clear about what you can and can't do, and even though you've promised yourself, so you have to look at the relationship as a value. If you value that relationship or even that potential relationship, the kindest thing you can do to them is show up either the way that you can and express that, or say, I overcommitted. So that's honesty, that's clarity. And just say, I promised X. I can't deliver X. I can deliver Y. I need you to find another piece. So, or I can help you, find you a resource or whatever. For me, that's just keeping that honesty. It's the most respectful thing to that person and to yourself. So I'm going to say, I'll use my living situation, for example. I live with a guy who has 3 kids, and I don't have the physical or emotional capacity sometimes to manage things the way that I need to. And there are days I have to say, I know I was supposed to have the kids until this time. We need to call their mom so that they can be there. And that's hard sometimes. It disrupts everybody's life, but I have to learn to get okay with it. Because I can't hurt myself or make myself sick again, because then I'm down again. And if I'm down again, how many times do I get down before I can't get up? How much damage I'm willing to do to that relationship by not doing it. And so then I'm just more cognizant moving forward about not promising to do certain things when I can't. And like I said, don't do things with resentment. And I know that people have done that for me in the last year, but I can't do that. I don't want to damage my relationships. I don't want that to be the pull for my emotional bank account to hold on to that, because it might have been too much that one time. And that's damaging to you. That's damaging to the relationship. So it also goes to just where you place value, even in a working relationship. There could be a time in the future where somebody asks me to do an event, and I might say yes, and there might be a point where I need to say I absolutely need to not do that. I could potentially find a replacement for me, but otherwise, unless you have some other resources. Is that helpful? Yeah.
I know that's been floating around a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just about how you value stuff. Like I hate burning bridges. I don't ever want to burn a bridge. And I am like recovering people pleaser, like through and through. And I genuinely believe that there are moments in our life where we overcommit to the place where we do make ourselves sick. And at the end of the day, we are who made that choice. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't like garner some sort of resentment inside of that relationship. And so ask yourself how much you value that person. And is there a way that you can express that to that person without it causing a rift? But also with being clear, because you absolutely can communicate in a way that's like around the fringe where the person doesn't actually get it. And then they're still disappointed in you.
So I see Ken do this really well. He does, in addition to your coaching business, you do construction projects, right? And every so often, one will take longer than you thought it would, and you have one scheduled after it. And I've occasionally been the one after it where you say, and it'll be like on Monday, he's supposed to come Tuesday, he realizes there's no way. He will send me a message to say, hey, this is taking me too long. Do you mind if we start, Wednesday or Thursday or whenever it is? And it's not like, oh, am I going to piss her off? There's not appear to be a lot of built up emotion behind that. And I usually just say, okay, because stuff happens. I think that is the thing people struggle with, is like in the moment realizing this is cascading into that and I better deal with that.
Right. The other thing is like managing your own expectations too, because like being on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Like life is life, stuff happens. And so like as a person, part of getting familiar with it yourself is understanding that people are also people. And so if your expectation is low and they overachieve, then great. But if it's like somebody you've never worked with, and I'm not saying have low expectations either, absolutely stick to your standard. Your standard is what's going to help your quality of life. But if you are unsure, then having that lower bar, like this would be great. If this happens, this is good. This is what's going to be disappointment for me. Then just managing your own expectations around it too. Communication is always great if you learn how to communicate well in a way where you can express what needs to happen versus maybe what is happening, so that person can understand, you're just speaking to another person at the end of the day. And lots of us do get in that place where, so I don't know how many of you know what I do. I'm a massage therapist. But specifically, I work with people who have trauma, and more specifically, emotional trauma. And I have clients who will, last night we were sitting out here and I got 3 back-to-back calls from one client. And I have my own boundaries around that. If you have good boundaries, and you should, then you know how to manage that differently. I get the 3 calls, third call, I'm like, can I help you reach out to somebody else who can help you better than I can right now? And while I am who she wanted to speak with, she said, I understand that you're busy. Yeah, could you message this person for me? And that was handled. And then she's fine today. I followed up and I checked in. And I do that with other people. When I'm somewhat letting somebody down, I'll say, did you ever find that? Because I might have a resource for it now. And it is like just, I think we overthink things sometimes to the point where we make decisions where we're completely over the top or underwhelming just because we think there's an expectation from the other person. And what you're providing should be from your boundaries and not their expectations.
Can we get that on a t-shirt?
Yes.
We probably could do a print on demand by the end of the workshop.
Any other questions?
So I'm intrigued by your never burn a bridge.
Okay.
I'm of the opinion that sometimes bridges need to be burnt. But maybe that's not the right way to look at it. Maybe that bridge needs to be crossed in the right way. And then if it's not crossed in the right way, it doesn't need to be crossed. I don't know if I'm making sense here.
I think I understand. I think it's not never burn a bridge. They burn. I mean,
I
they
don't
do.
like those mothers.
Yeah. Bridges do burn. I think the thing is, at the end of the day, and this is just from my experience where I'm coming from, sometimes accepting that a person is human and has made an error is sometimes the best way to let it go. Like maybe you don't cross the bridge, maybe you don't burn it, maybe you just walk away from it altogether. That's a thing that you kind of have to decide for yourself. Like burning a bridge to me, when I think about that, it has more to do with like destroying something, right? And that's anger. That's yours to manage. That's not somebody else's. So if you're angry at somebody, you're going to catch it on fire. Like if that's the thought. Or you could just walk away from it and decide that's not your route. So it depends on how you want to leave that. If you burn it to the ground, it's never there again. And maybe you don't ever need it to be there again. But if you never cross it and then you take some time away from it, there might be a point where you come back to it and say, yeah, today's the day I do cross that bridge. So when I say never burn a bridge, I don't mean never. I just mean some bridges just aren't worth the energy it takes to burn them down either.
T-shirt.
Here's a match.
The t-shirt generation.
All right.
We have an online question. Do you have any book recommendations that have helped you through the tough times or the hurt?
Oh my gosh. I probably have a list of books. If that person wants to contact me, can they contact me through you? Is that okay?
Just have to fill out the contact.
Yeah, fill out the contact form with Nicole. I'll get them up.
LivingFreeInTennessee.com.
I'll get you a list.
We should write an ebook.
I should write a book,
A
Ron.
list of books.
A list of books.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know. Yeah, y'all don't know fate on runs. You said that you have changed to a holistic
Mhm.
approach.
Yes.
How did you figure out the one you wanted to go with?
Well, because I'm a big reader, I like to know how things work and why they work and why people do certain things that they do. But on top of that, I'm a total herb nerd, and just even in my general practice, I'm a massage therapist. I make my own teas, I make my own body products and things like that. I've learned what to eliminate and what could. I'm basically a human science experiment. I spent the last year introducing and removing elements of how I'm caring for myself. I've recently introduced 2 new things into my regimen and am testing better than I have tested pretty much from stage 2. I'm testing better now than I've tested in the last year.
And it hasn't killed you yet.
It hasn't killed me yet.
Do you still see doctors?
I do. I get semi-regular testing. They've been very supportive within reason. And I say that just from the standpoint of obviously they are right and I am wrong, you know, and I'm not a doctor. So obviously I don't have the same foundational knowledge, but I do know my body and I do know myself. I do know what makes me feel good and what makes me feel bad, and I trust myself more than I trust anybody else.
So sometimes they'll recommend something or say something, you just kind of roll your eyes and move on.
Oh, I don't roll my eyes.
Spend a week reading about it.
Well, I do spend time reading about it, but the other thing I do is I'm very vocal about, like, I'm huge on advocating for yourself when you're in that arena, because nobody will ever teach you how. When you go in to see a doctor, their job is to answer your questions too. And can you please show me why that is the course of action? If they're not answering your questions, you might consider looking at another doctor, in my opinion. If they can't explain to you like the mechanism of your disease or illness even, they should be able, if they're treating that, they should be able to explain that to you. And just having gone through stuff, I've had times where my oncologist has said to me, I'm not exactly sure why that is that way. But can we follow up on this? And he's been phenomenal with being a clear communicator and following through on even things like that when he's like, I'm unsure why that's that way. But then you have to also educate yourself and figure out what the mechanism is according to science. Because when you have somebody who treats, 20, 40 people a day, they're not going to remember all the details, and they've learned all this different stuff too. So you have to be your own biggest advocate.
And use your community resources.
Definitely use your community resources. I don't know that I would have been doing as well if it weren't for the community. And I say that with like just genuine gratitude. I don't know that I've ever been so humbled and uplifted at the same time for the amount of people that showed up for me through that. It was a very devastating place to be, to have people say, I've got your back. I believe in you. You can do this. Like, to have that is, and especially on the scale, is almost unheard of sometimes. Because there were people that I've met throughout this who did not have, when I talk about going it alone, I mean physically alone. I had people with me every day. And that changed everything. And this is where that value of relationships comes into play. If you don't nurture those relationships, and I'm not talking about from a I might need you one day sort of place. Like, nurturing, that's pouring in. You're both pouring into each other. If I was just a mooch, you guys would have been like, good riddance. Maybe. I don't know. But we all pour into each other. And that's the whole point. And that's why I'm sitting up here right now, because I see so many people in our community still struggling to get to that place where they're not so worried about how somebody else is going to receive them, where they're not living the life they want because maybe it's not acceptable or it's not, the way that other people think it should be. And so they hide those pieces of their self. To me, that's a detriment to you, because then you always have to hide it. And that's heavy. That's a hard thing to carry. Like, if you can't be who you are around people who say, I love you to you, then what are you even doing? If you can't be who you are in front of the people who say, I'll support you through this, like, if you have to hide that, look, and this is me calling myself out. The first thing I did when I got my diagnosis was push people away, because I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want people to see me get sick. I didn't want people to see me lose my hair or get skinny and sunken in and go through all the things I knew was coming. I pushed people away until there was a moment where the universe was like, see, that's not how this works. We're going to just make you like super sick, And then you're going to have to depend on other people to help you out. Okay. So that you get it. You're not the one running the show here. And I got that. But I had like this phenomenal group of people show up for me and help me through, like I said, literally the hardest year, I think, to date. And that's not a challenge. That was to the universe.
Mhm. Well,
So-
that's about our time, guys. I do want to mention that Patrick's going to be set up at the workshop. If you don't know where the workshop is, you'll be walking down the hill from where lunch was served, and it'll be on the right-hand side, not the house, the next thing that you come to. And then, and Jenny is available all weekend to answer all of your questions.
For $19.99.
That's right.
I hope you enjoy my scrap metal pile. Hopefully we'll be forging with it.
Yeah, Knight Hawk has something that he would like to give you, Jenny.
Oh,
So,
wow.
on the basis of community, and I know how much you like to read, as you just said, I have a book here for you. So when you're
Wrapped
feeling
in a paper
stressed,
towel.
He wrapped it himself.
it's wrapped in a napkin, not a paper towel. So when you're feeling
As long as
stressed,
it's not toilet paper.
it's not toilet paper.
Okay.
It's not even used.
Okay.
So when you're feeling stressed, you can sit here, read the book at night, and at least most of them have signed this.
Okay.
I probably missed a couple people in here, I'm thinking.
You can make it up by
But-
signing it later, I'm sure.
But all you have to do, you just have to come up and ask her to sign the book. The code word is going to be the title of the book. What's the title of the book, Jenny? What's the title of the book, Jenny?
My favorite word.
Can you read us a paragraph?
I will not. Because
Just open it.
if you open it, every word is the word moist. I love it. Thank you.
So 245, foraging.
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 5-gin.
Foraging is at 4:45, I think, or 4:30, but
That's
foraging.
US banknotes, right?
Why did I put those on the same day? That's what I want to know.
Foraging, not foraging. Not
US
five-a-jing, not six-a-jing. Five-a-jing is right out.
Foraging.
SEC is gonna wanna know why there's a bank called forging.
No, like-
Signatures for sure.
That kind of forging.
Yeah.
The black box kind.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Look, they wanted me to be a rap star.
Hi there.
How's it going?
He's been trolling her with that word for years. So if you look on the one, is it?
I'll take
the
it
my house?
back.
Yeah. On the side of the toilet. Yeah.
I'll bring it up here for you.